I'm Alex Mozet, and welcome to today's special episode of Winner Take All. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mitch Lowe, the former CEO of MoviePass, president of Redbox, and co-founding executive of Netflix. Mitch has just come out with a new book called Watch and Learn: How I Turned Hollywood Upside Down with Netflix, Redbox, and MoviePass. Mitch, great to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
I also have my co-author, Nick Johnson, here as well. Nick, also good to have you here with us.
Good to be here. Excited for the conversation.
So, Mitch, the book has just come out. There's a lot of, good, fun stories and meat in this one. I guess, why put this together? You talk about kind of lessons in disruption. What was the impetus to actually put a book together, and what got you most excited about this book?
Well, I learned, especially from Mark Randolph, who is, the true co-founder of Netflix, the joy and the kind of excitement about starting up companies, taking ideas and turning them into products. And so, over the last years, when I reflect back on my favorite times, the times I felt the best, it was when I was working with people who are coming up with some crazy idea and wondering, is it feasible? Is it possible? And then kind of working with them. And so this book was really, my way to take a lot of what I've learned from other people and share it, via stories and via especially mistakes that I've made, share that with others. Ideally, people won't make the same mistakes, if they see them right out front like that. So that was my, my passion about doing this.
That's awesome. And it's interesting because, there's a lot of talk. It's a very timely book, right? I mean, if you look at the companies that you've been involved with and been at the helm with, right? Just rapid growth across, all these different areas of kind of the media and entertainment landscape. Is there a common recipe that you think about in terms of how do you really jumpstart that growth engine and put it into overdrive?
Oh yeah, there's 3 or 4 ingredients that I've learned are important. Those always change, the kinds of themes change and products and what customers want. But the primary thing is to identify a consumer need, identify something that isn't working right. At Netflix, in our second iteration, what we identified was that people loved watching movies and TV shows, but they hated having to return them. And they hated a limited selection, and they hated late fees. One of the things I always found interesting is that Blockbuster at the time in the late 90s and early 2000s was one of the top 10 brands in the country, yet it was also one of the most hated brands. And it was because people couldn't kind of sync up fun and entertainment with this fine of having to pay a late fee if you returned them late. So those are the things, that fascinate me about, today. I mean, you have so many ways to employ technology to solve customer problems. I mean, it's endless. Every day I go somewhere and I find something that doesn't work right and wish someone would fix it.
So you certainly developed a great nose, for what are those problems that are meaningful enough that you could drive really significant hyper growth. I think the numbers were at Netflix, there was kind of this huge sprint to get to 3 million subscribers kind of in the early days. I don't know if that rings a bell. And then I think when you were at MoviePass, I think you were talking a lot about, how do we get to 5 million users? And maybe you were at 2 million at the time, something to that effect, right? But doing it in a rapidly short period of time, are those numbers vaguely accurate? And why were those so meaningful?
Yeah, subscription services, whether it's music or movies or whatever it might be. And of course, today our world is filled with them. There's, hundreds and hundreds of options, niche players, broad spectrum players. But the first tier that seems to block a lot of these startups is 10,000 subscribers. 10,000 is kind of, okay, you got some form of an idea. Then it's 1 million. And then after that, it really depends on the business model. And for Netflix, for many, many years, the company operated at a negative cash flow. And, it cost money to mail the DVDs. It cost eventually when Netflix started making movies. It took, I think, last year, over $20 billion to make that year's series. And the way that gets amortized is over a long period of time. And so for each of these companies, there's a certain threshold of subscribers that spreads the cost out and generates enough revenue to offset, at least on the cash flow basis, those negative cash flows. At MoviePass, when we were at about between 2 and 3 million, the 5 million number, in my belief, was a critical threshold, because that meant at that point we would be buying about 1 in every 5 movie tickets in the U.S. When I made that statement, we were buying 6.6% of all the movie tickets. And so to get, up to 5 million at the rate of growth, that would have meant we had the clout to kind of push the studios and other businesses to acknowledge how much we could do to help their industry. And because, at the 2 and 3 million, I clearly was not, or the companies that could benefit from strategic partnerships with us were kind of closing their eyes to that possibility. A lot of times it reminds me of what United Airlines and Hilton Hotels, et cetera, would have done if they could, of stopping Orbitz and Expedia and all those companies that kind of got in between them and their customer. And by the time, MoviePass started getting big, companies started realizing, wait a minute, we've got to have a direct relationship with the customer. So I think that was kind of the guiding, that kind of guides those numbers.
I mean, it's kind of just a natural sprint you see in a lot of these marketplace oriented models is how fragmented is the supply in movies. You're basically up against this duopoly. I think Regal's supposed to go bankrupt any day now or something like that, funny enough. But it's basically, it's that sprint. Can you get enough leverage? Can you get enough demand before they can consolidate or, string you out long enough? And I think to your point, where you could then just leapfrog them and go to the studios. And now you just saw Adam Newman get, hundreds of millions of dollars. Was MoviePass basically just like one Masayoshi Son shy of making that? Because it seems like you got real close to really getting that kind of critical mass, as we would call it.
The business model was kind of formed on bringing in, offering an amazingly attractive price, building a huge customer base, and then monetizing that customer base through advertising and data analytics and selling marketing to the studios, even turning on our credit card so people could use it for dinner and drinks before or after a movie. We were getting close. The crazy thing, when I look back, and I write about this in the book, is that this whole period of time from 20,000 subscribers to 3.2 million subscribers was 8 months. It was way too short. And, I think it really provides a good warning sign that growth is important and momentum is important, but it can also be too fast. because it presents challenges that if you can solve them fast, that's one thing, but some problems are harder to solve in a short period of time.
Well, that's what the other Reed, right? Not Reed Hastings, but Reid Hoffman. His book Blitzscaling is saying. I mean, I feel like what Reid Hoffman is saying, like you are the epitome of that, where it's just scale at whatever means possible. And they actually just interviewed him, right? Because they said, hey, like Reid, do you take any of this back? Because he even says even management and culture is less important than growth, which in today's environment isn't really that kosher. But, I don't, it's very hard to point at another example, which would from 20,000 to millions in 8 months, right? I mean, that's a impressive feat. Even if you rack up the Adam Newmans of the world who had a lot of scale, but were burning many more billions of dollars to get there.
It's, I've run into, old friends at Netflix and Redbox is an exception to this, but other subscription services, people from Spotify and others, and they remind me just how much money they lost before they got profitable. I think Spotify was 1.4 billion. And Netflix was many hundreds of millions. It's part of the model today is if you can scale. Now you could go at this and stay small, of course, but if the business model requires you to monetize a large subscriber base and also over time reduce your costs. By better technology and employing better use of AI, et cetera, then you need to go fast, and that is brings on all kinds of challenges from a capacity. It's not only your people, but from a bandwidth side of things. Do your systems work when they multiply 200 times over a few month period? So and of course we experience lots of those hiccups and bugs where systems we had to struggle to keep them going.
One of the challenges, for any platform, particularly when you're trying to hit that point of critical mass, is every industry is a little bit different, and a big piece of what that threshold is often how fragmented the industry is, right? If there's a lot more fragmentation, there's a lot more that you can kind of capture easily, and the threshold might be a little bit lower. Mm-hmm. But in the movie theater industry in particular, there is in the U.S. this kind of big duopoly, AMC and Regal. How did that kind of impact your strategy and thinking, and what kind of played out with your experience at MoviePass?
Yeah. At the time, there was three big players: AMC, right, Regal, and Cinemark, and Cinemark is still, I think, number 3. And then it trails off, quite small. There's thousands of small theater owners. One of the things that I think that is important, and by the way, there was a lot of similarities when we at Netflix, when we first started working with the studios, there was traditionally 6 major studios. In that scenario, the studios never thought Netflix would succeed. They never, ever imagined. So they were ready to make deals that they almost laughed at, we'll take this money, but, this deal is going to last a year. At MoviePass, with these 3 companies, what I really failed to do was to start by creating allies in them. I approached this and thought, okay, I can show them how I can make them more money, a lot more money. And I thought that would overcome any kind of lack of willingness to work with us. What I should have done, and what I would say to anybody who's trying to disrupt a big business with a duopoly or 3 major companies, is start by creating allies within them, even just one of them. That is something that, unfortunately, I thought the logic of making more money would overcome, and it turned out to be a big mistake.
If you could get one of the three to, be a little bit more favorable, then now that kind of mixes up and changes the dynamics a bit.
Yeah, it's almost like that, when you just have a couple of big players, you've got to peel them off. It's why the Byzantine Empire lasted so long. They were able to get this group, this Turk group, and that Turk group to fight against each other. And in this scenario, I failed to do that.
I'd say even though they didn't join forces with you guys, they did end up sort of embracing the subscription model, right? We've seen, both AMC and Regal, having to fast follow and come into the market. What's your view on kind of why that happened and of their success there?
Well, if you look over the last 20 years of the movie theater business, the amount of tickets sold has stayed relatively flat. There's been, a few blips here and there, but generally flat. Yet the revenue is doubled. And that's solely because they've doubled the prices of tickets. And not to mention and I'm not even including concession sales, which are an 80% profit margin product and hugely expensive. So what the movie theaters have, I hope, realized is that they need to do something other than keep raising the price. And consumers over this last 20 years have really gotten used to subscription services where they don't have to make that a la carte decision on a film by film basis. Like, is this worth $10? Is this what, maybe I'll just wait for Netflix. And so AMC and Regal and Cinemark has a kind of a variation of this. This subscription idea is really what made Netflix and other subscription services so successful, is it got people to explore entertainment they never would have paid on the a la carte basis. And so their interest expand and their interest in film expands. So I think the AMCs of the world recognize that there are a certain amount of potential subscribers who will go more often. They are missing several other huge opportunities, which I hope they embrace at some point. But they're in a very challenging position.
Is there a degree to which, I think, as the pandemic has made clear, they kind of viewed you as the competition when you came in? Mm-hmm. But to a degree, it was really they were competing with Netflix, HBO Max, and the streaming services, which I think the pandemic has really sharpened that picture.
Yeah, I think almost every meeting I went into with a theater owner started by saying, we hate what you did at Netflix. You're killing us. And, my response was, no, they weren't killing you. They were responding to a customer need, which you aren't doing. And of course, that started out the relationship a little bit negative. But, the point is that cinemas or theaters have become totally beholden to the man, to those 6 studios that control the product you play, control the pricing that you charge. I mean, every other country in the world the theaters have the flexibility to charge what they think customers will pay for. In the US, the studios have established a system that prevents theaters from doing that. Yes, there's a Tuesday discount day and there's senior discounts, but those were hard-fought battles just to get that. The studios have typical minimums of $5 per ticket no matter what, which means you got to charge, more than that. So, it's a fascinating segment of the industry, but one where these guys better do something much more than just doing subscription.
Given that dynamic you mentioned specific in the US, do you think there's more opportunity in the future for a movie pass-like service elsewhere in the world?
Probably. it takes a lot of guts, I think, and a lot of money to make it work. The couple things that are unique about the U.S., England, and Australia, Canada included to a certain extent, is we consume a ton more entertainment than everybody else. The average television in the U.S. is on 35 hours a week. Whereas at the maximum, it's 11, 12 hours in other countries. So it's, so the opportunity from a business model is there and the willingness to work on things like this, but the interest in going to the movie theaters is not as big.
How drastic was the shift, or was there a drastic shift when you have that hyper growth, those 8 months, and then ultimately need to fold up shop at MoviePass? Was there just a lot of people who were friendly and rooting for you and currying favor on your way up, and then, aren't returning your phone calls and are kicking you while you're down after the fact?
No, there's, I say this a lot when, I talk to startups and companies about company culture, is that it's a whole lot easier to build a great culture when things are going up to the right, and a whole lot harder when things are not going well. And so you get a lot of people abandoning ship. You get a lot of people saying, "I told you so." You get potential strategic partners who were on the fence, who are now changing. But it all makes sense. I mean, everybody is out, for their own self and their own future. And so I never felt, bad about it. It never, it hurt a little bit, but I always thought, that was my mistake. And in fact, I call the second chapter about MoviePass in my book is how I forgot everything I ever learned. And so I never, I just thought, what, I really messed this thing up. I made, some bad decisions that ended up not working, timing wise and so on. I make excuses too because of the shortness of time. But, when I'm sitting by myself, I realize that, when you're starting a company or you're running a company, it's your responsibility, to more often than not make the right decision.
Some good lessons learned. You got to read the book to find out what those are. When you think about being able to break through, COVID, no one going to the theaters, do you think that that would have actually been, even if you had made it through, that would have been kind of the final death knell for the company? Or do you think, if you had been there and had digital, that maybe you could have been a solution for the industry while everyone was, stay at home and quarantining and the like?
Yeah, I think it would have been, death anyway. I think that, there are companies that survived, by just, like pulling in all the spending and, probably tapping into government support and so on. But, I think at that time, early on, people thought it would last a short time. So we probably would have lasted a few months. But then I think people started going, geez, this is never going to end. And who knows, we could have been one of those companies that, the Robinhood investors went into, like they did with AMC and GameStop. But yeah, I don't think we would have survived.
Yeah, Adam Aron has certainly, I think, probably gotten the better of the meme stock wars these past couple of years. That's for sure.
No, he's definitely been on the winning side of this whole battle.
You've been through a few waves, in your career of kind of what I would call evolutions of the entertainment business. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the industry going next? Where do you see kind of disruption happening? There's a lot of hype around stuff like the metaverse and Web3, for example. Do you think that's it, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I give a speech now called "From Netflix to the Metaverse," and I talk about the kind of how that evolution of the internet is it's kind of like Netflix is a proxy for that evolution. Going from mailing DVDs to streaming to then making entertainment. And I'm a huge fan of the metaverse and of all the potentials with it. I am a little concerned that especially because of the 3D goggles required to really get the best out of it. I am still concerned that technology has not been developed that really kind of overcomes all the problems. I think it will be overcome. Over the course of these last 20 years, I've known and worked with people who've introduced technology that seemed to be so good, and then people hype it, and then you never hear of it again. So I'm not quite sure yet that the metaverse is ready for embracing, and whether it's NFT or crypto or I'm still concerned that it's edgy at this point, it's not ready for prime time. And of course, coming up with the glasses is going to make a huge impact. But it's almost, for me, the beauty of all this is that we go back to what the physical world was like. We're recreating all the things that were great in the physical world. Like if you just take simply shopping, going into a metaverse mall and seeing the avatars of other shoppers and being able to engage with the clerks who can tell you more about the product or demonstrate it, but in a metaverse world, I think that's much better than shopping on a 2D screen where you read about it or you might see a video about the product. I also like the simulation side of things where if you're trying to plan out a new city or plan out a house, how you can, kind of build it yourself and get a feel for what it's going to feel like, or, and whether it's, a police department or a fire squad, knowing how to go into a building and save people. I think those simulations are great. Of course, gaming, they've been in the metaverse already for 20 years. So it's nothing new to gamers. So all those aspects I really like. And I love the whole idea of, and this is kind of a step-by-step evolution of incorporating AI and machine learning into our kind of our now 3D web experience. Those I think are fascinating. I mean, the ability to know what someone wants and give it to them in a 3D experience, I think is, huge. Just stupid things today, like, I just came back from Buenos Aires and I was renting a car, and the amount of time it takes to rent a car outside the US is like, mind-boggling. And, they ask questions that they already, if they looked at their computer or you had any kind of AI applied to it, they would already know what kind of car I like, how long I'm going to take it. So it's just, I think there's huge opportunity, especially as and this is where I think all cool new products come from, is that integration of 2 or 3 new technologies working together. Netflix came about because you had this new DVD format that weighed less than an ounce. You had a good US mail, and you had the internet, and you combine those 3. And it's, that I now sounds archaic, but almost every cool product these days is a combination of multiple technologies.
Do you think MoviePass 2.0 and their reboot with their new technology, I guess they're adding in as Web3 capability or something like that? Do you think that's got some magic combination in it?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I do know that the MoviePass's co-founder, Stacy Spikes, is the one that bought it out of bankruptcy. And I know that had I listened to him more often, MoviePass would have done better. So I have a lot of faith in him, and he is a very thoughtful, smart guy. So I think if anybody can do it, he's definitely the one. Exactly how they're going to do it, I don't know enough to know, other than what I've read in the press.
Will you be a user potentially of the new MoviePass?
I wish, but I don't live in the U.S. any longer. I live in Mexico, so when they if they
future
come
expansion,
here, I will try it. And the Latin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned a couple times, right? Like, hey, there's things I learned. And I think there's some really good lessons in the book. I guess, what do you think if the things you learned, is it just the time and the lack of time and the cycles and speed that you're moving in these environments that says, for example, yes, Stacy was giving me some really good advice. I just didn't have the time to actually, maybe think about it, assess it, and then work it into our plan. How do you think about balancing those sides of the fence when you're in such a pressure chamber of an environment?
Yeah, it's really hard. And I think it comes down to the sheer quantity of issues you have to deal with. We had way too many issues to deal with all at the same time. And that did limit my kind of ability to take each one and consider carefully. I had a great team, including Stacy for all the way up until the last year. And had great advisors. And some of it was disagreeing, with the advice. Some of it was not hearing it well enough. So I think time is an issue, but there's also, you do need to balance a little bit better. And what I found is that, working 12 hours a day doesn't give you the time to think. But at the same time, you argue with yourself is I don't have time to go for a hike, but it definitely is important. It's if I had to do it all over again, I would have actually reduced the amount of time that I was working, with MoviePass as opposed to increase it. That I think would have given better consideration.
Yeah, finding that balance. I'm just saying, yeah. and maybe forcing other decisions to other people, or right. Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, I have friends who are really good at it, who say, you know what, Tuesday night is date night with my wife, and I don't care what's going on. That's sacrosanct, and I will never break into that. Or, I'm finished work at 6 o'clock, no matter what. And those people, everyone I know who has those rules does well.
So learning to say no.
Learning to say no. That was actually, one of the first things I learned from Reed Hastings was how to say no to an amazing, what seemed to me and actually produced amazing revenue. I talk about this in the book that at one point when we were struggling to make money or to overcome a negative cash flow, we had all these people wanting to buy advertising on our red envelope. and we were taking in checks, and we built a sales department. If anybody ever remembers Egghead Software, the catalog book, we hired the top salesperson, a woman who ran the sales there. And one week, the advertiser didn't approve the artwork on the envelope fast enough. This was very early on. And so we shipped late. And Reed closed down the department, tore up all the checks, sent all the money back, and said, listen, even though that's a lot of money, we forecasted 25 million a year in those days. He said, it's going to keep us from doing the one thing that is super important, that's mailing on time, people getting their movies on time. So he really taught me, although I didn't follow it all that often, was to say no when it doesn't, fit as the right thing to do.
Very tough, and very tough to do in such a short period of time when you have so many new challenges and so many new opportunities that you kind of need to figure out where they land on that scale.
The rule of thumb that he taught me was only do those things that you can do better than anybody else. And if you're doing something that's just another, way, you're doing something someone else can do better, then you're probably not doing that. Those are the things you should say no to.
And then, he became a movie studio, trying to make better movies and shows than all the other movie studios. And I'd say, yeah, they've definitely accomplished that in certain areas for sure.
I mean, if you look at the evolution, that would have been a thing early on that he would have said, we're never going to do because we can't be as good as Disney or, 20th Century Fox or Paramount. But over time, they came to the conclusion that, with their understanding of consumer taste and their ability to market and merchandise content better than anyone else, they actually could be a major studio. And of course, are a major studio.
What competitive advantages beyond just cash did they need to arrive at in order to wade into those waters successfully?
And it really came down to understanding. It's kind of this push-pull idea. They were able to understand what people wanted to watch, and then they were able, once they had the content, they were able to promote it to those specific people in just the right way.
And so what do you think about, shifting gears for a second here, if you look at the what we would call kind of the tech monopolies, the content platforms like, the YouTubes of the world, you could also put other more social media like TikTok and Instagram and these other kind of content platforms in. Amazon owns Twitch, right? I mean, what we see and what we talk a lot about on the show is kind of this convergence. You see all these kind of content platform tech monopolies that have the dirty word in the media industry called user-generated content, trying to invest in that premium kind of studio production quality content. And you've seen just about all of those players get into it in a very real way. But at the same time, you don't really see the traditional players, Netflix included, from Netflix to Disney and all those on down the chain, kind of crossing the chasm in the other direction. How do you see a convergence? Do you see kind of the tech / now content players and the more traditional content players, which is where I would include Netflix as well, right? But they've been able to advance their own kind of technology ahead of the other studios. What do you see the future of that look like? I know, very broad question, but curious how you think about it.
Yeah, no, it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about today. And I start from the point of just how much content there is today and how much is being produced every day. And I include, user generated as well as scripted and, kind of series and movies. See a bunch of things happening. The ability to, or the desire to watch long content is declining rapidly. People aren't ready to sit down for a 2-hour movie very often anymore. And even 30-minute episodes are getting too long. And the 2, 3 minute, 1 minute, 15-second TikToks, the 10-minute YouTube clips are becoming kind of what people really want. People's attention span is getting shorter and shorter. At the same time, they want fully developed stories. They want to fall in love with characters and they want a continuation. So they just don't want to see a 2-minute clip and then never see that character again. And so companies like TikTok are hiring companies like TikTok are hiring former Netflix executives in their strategy teams.
Were you bullish on Quibi?
I know because Quibi was kind of, taking out of the hands of the consumer what was being presented. It was kind of the same, it was the same thing like Netflix, because they were deciding what to buy and what to show rather than the consumer, even though there was a little bit of a voting, and always there's a demand driving issue there. But I think they put the cart before the horse. They just poured a bunch of money into it. I love the user generated content. To me, that's the future. And it's almost like scripted versus unscripted battle. The battle 10, 20 years ago was, oh my God, the creative community is never going to come back because it's all unscripted, game shows and, challenge shows and stuff. So I think what's happening is both sides are going to realize there's a place, for Netflix, exclusive creative series. There's a place for user generated. The user generated companies are going to teach their creators how to create longer stories, in 1-minute bites. And I think over time, series are going to, made by Netflix and others, are going to be told in a way that makes you think they were user generated. And so I think the two are going to get closer and closer. And especially as younger people, the Gen Z start to take over even more of the consumption and spending, I think that will happen faster. So what excites me from a technology standpoint is, how do you find, amongst these billions of pieces of content, how do you find something you're going to enjoy rather than just randomly finding it because of some algorithm, that TikTok or Netflix presents? And those are the companies that I think are the most fascinating, the ones that are dissecting entertainment in a kind of a genomic way, kind of like Pandora did for music, and help people because when I go to Netflix today, I keep seeing the same things. It's too hard to discover new stuff. And I think companies, there's one called Catch Media that's out there that is, it's founded by one of the guys who wrote the Pandora music genome. And it's companies like that are going to help people discover, not just see good stuff, but discover new stuff they wouldn't have thought about.
Well, Mitch, it's been an absolute delight having you on the show. Go check out the book. It's out now. It's called Watch and Learn: How I Turned Hollywood Upside Down with Netflix, Redbox, and of course, MoviePass. Mitch, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been great.